فاتحة. السلام عليكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد سيد الأولين والآخرين. مدد يا رسول مدد يا سادة أصحاب رسول مدد يا مشايخنا نستور ولا شاء الله فاز أحسن شيخ محمد مدد. طريقتنا الصحبة والخير في الجمعية. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذين ينفقون أموالهم في سبيل الله ولا يتبعون ما أنفقوا منا ولا أذى. صدق الله العظيم. Allah Azze ve Celle buyuruyor, Allah için verip de ondan sonra onun başına kalkıp minnet etmeyen müminler, onlar makbul insanlardır.
Allah Almighty says that those who spend their wealth in the cause of Allah Almighty and who do not follow up their gifts with reminders of their generosity, their reward is with their Lord Allah Almighty. The believers are those who give for the sake of Allah Almighty and do not constantly remind others of what they have given. Those are acceptable people in the divine presence.
Allah rızası için verilmişse o makbul bir şeydir.
If you give for the sake of Allah Almighty in order to make your Lord Allah Almighty be pleased with you, then this is an acceptable deed.
Onun için onu bozmaya gerek yok.
And you should not spoil what you have given for the sake of Allah Almighty.
Nasıl bozulur?
How could it be spoiled?
İşte ben verdim, şöyle yaptım, böyle verdim de dersen
do not spoil your rewards by becoming arrogant and saying things like, I gave this, I did this, or I did that, I accomplished this or that.
Tabii o sevap gene vardır ama işte o kadar iyi değil yani.
Of course, there's still goodness and reward for the good thing you did. However, the reward is no longer as high as it used to be.
Yüksek değil. Onu minnet etmeden Allah bize nasip etti deyip sevinerek verirsen o vakit senin kat kat yüksektir.
If you do something good, if you spend your wealth for the sake of Allah Almighty, or if you do something for the sake of Allah Almighty, then do not become boastful and do not constantly remind people of your generosity and do not constantly remind people of what you did. Instead, say, Allah Almighty has granted it to us. Allah Almighty has enabled us to do this goodness, and then give joyfully for the sake of Allah Almighty without boasting about what you did. Then your reward is going to be multiplied.
Minnet edip de verilenden gizli verilen sadakalar, öyle şeyler daha makbuldür.
Charities and good actions, good deeds, which are performed or given secretly, are more acceptable.
Bazen de başkalarını teşvik etmek için açıktan da verilebilir ama
of course, sometimes you may give charity openly in order to encourage others.
O mühim değil, mühim olan minnet ettirmemek. El minnetü lillah yazarlardı eskiden tabelalarla. Minnet Allah'ındır.
Whatever you give secretly or openly, you should always consider that you must not boast about what you did, and you must not constantly remind people of what you gave. Instead, you must give for the sake of Allah Almighty, and what you gave must only be dedicated to Allah Almighty, and you should not boast about those things which you gave, or you must not boast about those things which you did for the sake of Allah Almighty, because it is Him, Allah Almighty, who enabled you to do all those things, and you should not make people thank to you. Instead, you should always be aware that it is Allah Almighty who enabled you to do these blessed actions, and you must make people become aware that they should always thank Allah Almighty, and favor and thanks and praise belong to Allah Almighty.
Allah yeminnu aleykum. Allah size minnet eder. Hedakumul iman. İmana hidayet ettiği için
It is Him, Allah Almighty, who bestows His divine favors and blessings upon you, and it is Him, Allah Almighty, who guides you to the faith. Goodness comes from your Lord Allah Almighty, and it is your Lord Allah Almighty you should be thankful to, and you should not make others thank you.
minnet Allah'ındır. Allah'tan başka kimseye minnet etmesi
It is Him, Allah Almighty, who grants all these favors and blessings and who enables you to do all these things, and therefore thanks and praise belong to Allah Almighty.
makbul değildir. Güzel bir şey değildir.
And making other people thank you, making other people be grateful to you is not something that is acceptable. Allah Almighty does not like you to make others make thankful or grateful to yourself. That is not a good thing. It is not a good action.
Bir hareket değildir. Minnet etmek insanları birbirlerine kötü baktırır ya düşman ettirir.
To boast about the things you did, to remind others of all those things you did, and constantly show those things to others in order to make them praise you, in order to make them thankful to you, or in order to make them grateful to you. That is not something good, and Allah Almighty does not like you to do those things. What will happen in the end will be that people will think ill of you, and it will spread animosity among you. It will turn you into enemies.
Şey olur, o minnet Allah'a mahsustur.
You must know that it is not you doing that favor. You must know that it is Allah Almighty who provides that favor. You must know that it is Allah Almighty who deserves thanks and gratefulness.
O bize bu şeylerin sebtide ona minnet etmemiz lazım.
Be grateful to Allah Almighty for granting us these things.
İnsanlara minnet etmekte Allah Azze ve Celle'ye minnet.
You must be aware that it is Allah Almighty who bestows His divine favors and blessings upon you, and you should not make people thank to you, but make people aware to be thankful to Allah Almighty.
Ona minnettarız. Allah Azze ve Celle bize buna güzel şeyleri nasip etti de.
We are grateful to Him, Allah Almighty, because it is Him ultimately who has granted us these beautiful things.
Her türlü şey sırf kendimize, başkasına her şeye Allah'a minnettarız.
We are grateful to Allah Almighty for everything He gave to us, for everything He gave to others, for everything.
Allah Azze ve Celle bize verdi diye kimse gocunmaz. Allah'a minnet etti diye.
And no one may feel offended by what Allah Almighty gave. It is Allah Almighty who gives as He likes, and it is Him, Allah Almighty, who deserves all thanks and all praise.
Ama insan birbirine şey yaparsa bazı şeyler sıfatlar ya şeyler Allah'ın sıfatıdır.
There are certain attributes which solely belong to Allah Almighty.
Bazıları insan olduğuna da nasip oluyor o.
But there are also divine attributes which Allah Almighty granted to human beings,
Cömertliktir, güzelliktir falan.
such as generosity and beauty and other qualities.
Allah'ın sıfatlarında insanlardan da olur.
These are attributes of Allah Almighty, but Allah Almighty made them to be also found in people.
Ama bazı sıfatlar var. Kibir Allah'a mahsustur.
But there are some attributes, such as pride, which belong only to Allah Almighty.
Kibriya, sahibi kibriya Allah'tır.
Allah Almighty is the one who may have pride. He Almighty Allah is the owner of grandeur. He Almighty Allah is the owner of greatness. Him alone.
Sen kibir yapamazsın.
You cannot be proud.
Minnet Allah'ındır. Sen
Favors are given and provided to us by Allah Almighty.
minnet ettirir. Senin de ya, makbul olmaz işlerin.
But if you think that it is you who does those things, and if you then make people thank you, then your deeds will not be accepted.
Zor olur.
It will be difficult for your deeds to be accepted.
İşte Allah'a şükür. Allah'a minnettarız. Allah
Therefore, thank Allah Almighty, and we are grateful to Allah Almighty.
bize nasip etsin. Her türlü iyiliği, her türlü hayrı yapalım.
May Allah Almighty grant us to do every kind of goodness, to perform every kind of good deed,
Kimseye minnet etmem inşallah.
and may Allah Almighty protect us from becoming arrogant and claiming things for ourselves and making others thank us.
Allah tevfik. El Fatiha.